Hi, I'm Pastor John from New Life Assembly, and today in our daily devotions we are concluding the Song of Solomon. In chapter 8, we'll start in verse 8, and we'll go to the very end of the chapter and the book. And so let's take a look at what the conclusion of this book has to tell us about married life and what kind of advice we can find within its pages. Song of Solomon, chapter 8, beginning in verse 8. The others are speaking, and in this case it is the brothers of Shulamith. They say, "We have a little sister, and she has no breasts. What shall we do for our sister on the day when she is spoken for? If she is a wall, we will build on her a battlement of silver. But if she is a door, we will enclose her with boards of cedar." Now Shulamith speaks. "I was a wall, and my breasts were like towers. Then I was in his eyes as one who finds peace. Solomon had a vineyard at Baal-Hamon. He let out the vineyard to keepers. Each one was to bring for its fruit 1,000 pieces of silver. My vineyard, my very own, is before me. You, O Solomon, may have the 1,000, and the keepers of the fruit 200. Then Solomon speaks. "O you who dwell in the gardens with companions listening for your voice, let me hear it." And then the woman responds, "Make haste, my beloved, and be like a gazelle or a young stag on the mountains of spices." As we conclude the book of the Song of Solomon, we find here one of the last known issues that married couples will have to deal with. And that is, married couples will always have to deal with the problem of social engagements, of having friends and having to deal with their marital life and their social life, their private life and their public life, their desire for intimacy and quiet time and togetherness with their spouse, with the fact of parties and social engagements and friends and people that they also have part of their life with, share part of their life with. And so there'll be this constant draw between the two. First, as we remember from yesterday, as we looked at the beginning of chapter 8, we've been looking at their life as it has formed, and they're going back as they're older and looking back at their marriage and at their friends and at their friendship together, and they're focusing on the good things. And so just as the book of Song of Solomon starts in chapter 1 with the brothers who are making her work in the field, Shulamith begins to recount and remember whenever her brothers were careful to guard her from any advances of men who did not deserve their sister. Part of the reason that they're guarding is a cultural reason, that in that day it was up to the men of the household to guard the family name and honor. And so that's part of why they're doing it. But the other part still exists today. And that is simply this, that brothers and fathers, it is their duty to make sure that their sister, that their daughter, chooses someone worthy of her. Oftentimes we see that women will choose someone that is not worthy of them. And they will find themselves later on in life in a situation in which they realize this was not the right guy. And some of the vetting for that can be done by dads and by brothers. Because, let's face it, who knows the heart of a man better than another man? Who knows what guys are like but other guys? And some of the things that women may not notice, maybe their fathers and brothers might notice. Of course, this precludes the idea that your family, your brothers and your father are righteous men that seek your very best. That is not always the case, unfortunately, in our world today. But in Shulamith's case, she came from a good home, a good family, a mother who taught her how to be a good spouse and a good wife and a good woman first, and then also brothers who took into account keeping her safe from men who would mistreat her, monsters who would abuse her. And so this is what we see. Whenever they talk about her in her youth, before it's time for her to be married, they're talking about her being a door or of being a wall. The idea of being a wall is the idea that she herself would refuse the advances of any man who was not to be her husband. And what the brothers say is, in that case, this is great. We will reward her, we'll bless her with silver because of her choice to remain chaste before it's time to be married. But the other idea, the idea of a door, is one who is more open and flirtatious with men, one who would so enjoy her sensuality among men, the fact that men observe her, look at her, take notice of her. Their idea then, these brothers, is to then take care of her in a different kind of way, to sort of lock her in, to prize her sensuality more than she does, and her virginity more than she does. And so these are good brothers who have the very best of intentions for her. And you know what? Shulamith, she picks up on that. And when she speaks, she affirms what they did for her. She affirms the fact that she was a wall, that she wanted to wait for the right man. She wanted to be that person who was pure before marriage, and then in marriage, and during her marriage. And so she, it seems, was the kind of woman that the brothers didn't have to necessarily keep on too much of an eye on, but of course it was their duty to do so. And so she talks about herself and says, essentially, and she's talking about her breast, she's saying that when she was young, where her brothers saw someone who was unready for marriage, it was at the time that she met Solomon that she was ready, and that she knew he was the right one. This is kind of the idea of the text, is that Shulamith finds her peace. Remember the play on words here. Shulamoth, Sholaman, okay, Sholomo, those are the names, Solomon and Shulamith. And the word for peace is shalom. And so we need to remember that they sort of found their wholeness, their peace, their completeness in one another. And this is the idea that she's talking about her breast. She's saying they weren't for other men, they were for Solomon, and Solomon alone. And we have seen that throughout the book, that Solomon has taken delight in her physical form, from her head to her toes. And that is how it should be in marriage. As we continue on through, it talks about Solomon's vineyard. Now the vineyard throughout the book has been both literal and figurative. Solomon and Shulamith have both talked about working in vineyards and being part of vineyards, but at the same time, Solomon especially has used the vineyard as a figurative language, a figurative image for his bride, for her body, for her fertility. And it's the same idea of what grows in a vineyard, but fruit and sustenance and produce. And so the idea is that same fertility is part of the woman's nature as the one who bears sons and daughters, the one who carries children, and is the one who will be impregnated. So the idea there is that the woman is like a vineyard. And so here it talks about how Solomon would allow other men to come and to use his vineyard, but they would have to pay a steep and heavy price, because we're talking about the king's vineyard here. Okay, that's the literal physical image. But then Shulamith takes it to be figurative when she says, Solomon, my vineyard is only for you. You're the one who's going to be the one here. There's not going to be any other hired men or hired hands. It's going to be you and only you. And so this is what she expresses as she compares the amount of money that men would have to pay to work in Solomon's garden with the same amount that Solomon will have for her, as she is his vineyard. She belongs to him, is what she's basically telling him there. And at the same time, in verses 13 and 14, Solomon speaks back to her, and he says, "Oh, you who dwell in the gardens, with companions listening for your voice, let me hear it." And basically he is making, in a sense, a real complaint that she's too popular. She's got all these friends and all these people around her now, and they're all listening to her, telling about whatever she wants to talk about. She's got her circle of friends. And everyone needs a circle of friends and people that they can hang out with and be themselves around and truly be friendly. But at the same time, Solomon, just like earlier, in the public square, in the streets, as they walked together, and she wanted to be closer to him than she was allowed to be by social convention. So also, her social life is now interfering with Solomon's desire to be with her and be alone with her and hear only her voice and not the voices of her friends. And so he calls to her and says, I want to hear your voice, not anybody else's. I want you to be with me alone. And then the book finishes with the same, we've seen this before in chapter 2. Make haste, my beloved, and be like a gazelle or a young stag on the mountains of spices. And this is the woman speaking. Now she spoke it before in a desire to be with Solomon sensually, sexually, physically. She spoke this before, except it was a little bit different. There she mentioned actual mountain ranges and places. Here she says the mountains of spices. Spice throughout the book has referred to their sexual relationship. And so the way that this book ends, it sort of bookends itself, because it starts with Shulamith, it ends with Shulamith. It starts with her family life, and it ends with her family life and how they've helped her to become the woman that she is. And the fact of the matter is that each one of us is a product of our history, of our background, of our upbringing. And it's so important for us to have godly families so that we might be godly in our relationships as well. I want to challenge you, not just as a pastor, but as a Christian in general, to be the very best that you can be. Prepare yourself. Have godly character in place. Have godly passions in place before you give yourself away to your spouse in marriage. Look for a man or a woman who is worthy of you and whom you're worthy of. Don't settle for less. Look for the one that God is bringing to you. And always have that character. Always have that mind. I'll finish with this. A lot of people think that in getting married, they'll make their spouse better. And that is true. That is true. You will grow to help one another in marriage, to be companions and to be counterparts of one another. You will indeed make your spouse better. As a whole, the two will become one flesh. But at the same time, you can't fix the problems in your spouse that you see. You can't do it. God can do it, but you can't do it. You need to be part of the facilitation of that growth in godliness, that change in character. But you should never, ever, ever settle for less and go, well, in marriage it'll get better. The fact of the matter is, marriage just puts you in close quarters with the person you either love or did not love. And it is much, much better to be prepared for marriage and your character and your person, who you are, to be comfortable with yourself first, and then to be comfortable with your spouse, who will make you better. But it's a whole lot easier when you're already striving to be better on your own, when you're already looking to Christ and looking to His character. And so I end with just telling you, don't get married expecting that marriage will make you better. Get married already being the person that you would like to be around your spouse. And then, as you're married, work on it. Make yourself even better for that person. And you will find that your marriage will never grow cold. Your passion will never lose its flame or its heat, because you will constantly be looking for the very best in one another and be following after Christ. I hope this helps you in your marriage, and I hope we've covered the Song of Solomon in a way that's helpful for you personally. And I'm looking forward to our next video series. Tomorrow we're going to start the book of Galatians about the true gospel, and I think we're going to have a lot of fun. So I hope you're having a blessed day, and I'll see you tomorrow.